Good morning. My name is Jonathan, and I will be reading the lesson for today. If you happen to pick up a Bible as you enter the church, the lesson can be found on page 1017. It's John chapter 21, verses 1 through 19. And if you don't happen to have a Bible, you can keep that Bible as a gift from the church. John 21, verses 1 through 19. Afterward, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee. It happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, also known as Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two other disciples were together. "I'm going out to fish," Simon Peter told them. And they said, "We'll go with you." So they went out and got into the boat. But that night they caught nothing. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. He called out to them, "Friends, haven't you any fish?" "No," they answered. He said, "Throw your net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some." When they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. Then the disciples whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, "It is the Lord," he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and jumped into the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish, for they were not far from shore, about 100 yards. When they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there with fish on it and some bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish you have just caught." So Simon Peter climbed back into the boat and dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153, but even with so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." None of the disciples dare ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came, took the bread, and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was now the third time Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than this?" "Yes, Lord," he said. "You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my lamb." Again, Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep." The third time, he said to them, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, "Do you love me?" He said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my sheep. Very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go." Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. There he said to him, "Follow me." This is the gospel of the Lord.
Morning. As Pastor Steve shared, my name is Bob Abrams. I serve as assistant to our bishop, Suzanne Darcy Dillahunt. The bishop sends me this morning with a very important message, and that is, she said, "Tell him I said hi." Can I tell her you said hi back? We actually do that, by the way. You know, I also get to bring you, because of the nature of my work, I get to bring you greetings from 190 other sister congregations of this congregation from across the southern half of the state of Ohio. That's about 68,000 Christians, Lutheran Christians, who are in this journey together. But most importantly, I'm here to offer you congratulations on the calling of your new pastor, Mike Weaver. It's an exciting time, isn't it not? To be getting a new pastor. But I think it's also an opportunity to step back. It's an opportunity to step back and think about what it means to be church in a day like the day we live in. Isn't it true that being the church is not what it used to be in our culture? How many of you remember when people just got up and went to church because that's what you did? How many of you were raised by people like that? I don't care how late you are out on Saturday night, your butt's going to be in church on Sunday morning. You know, in those days, if you wanted to be an upstanding member of your community, you did a couple of things. You joined the Rotary or the Lions or the Kiwanis, and you found a church. If you wanted to be a good kid to your parents, you went to church. But guess what? Those days are long gone. Long gone. In fact, I think the social pressure that used to exist to go to church is the opposite now. There's pressure not to go to church. Most people do not look for meaning in organized religion. And we have some pretty good numbers on this. The best numbers indicate that fewer than 30% of Americans will darken the door of a house of worship in the course of a year, and less than 15% will attend weekly. That's less than 1 in 6. And you know what? When I'm not in church on Sunday mornings, yes, I know, you say, Pastor Bob, why aren't you in church? Well, sometimes I'm on vacation. But you know, you see people out. 5 out of 6 people are not in church on Sundays. So you may be wondering, why is Pastor Abrams here to depress us? I'm not here to depress you. I'm here to proclaim to you good news. And that is this. You and I are not saved by organized religion. And we never have been. We're not made whole with God. We are not made right with God by the social pressure to attend church. And we never have been. Instead, we're saved by a person. And that person's name is Jesus. And the good news for us is this. We're not here on a Sunday morning to offer this community another flavor of organized religion. Because they're not looking for that anyway. We're here for one reason and one reason only. And that is to lift up the name of the crucified and risen Jesus for the whole world to see. If we're not doing that, we're wasting our time. We're here to worship a God who meets us where we are, but never leaves us there. I think this reading from John's Gospel today is a really great reading for talking about installing a new pastor, because it's a window. It's a window into the character of Jesus, the one we lift up and proclaim. What do I mean by that? Well, if you take a little bit of a longer view in the Gospels, it wasn't long ago that we were hearing that Peter was in the inside circle of Jesus' disciples. He was the first guy, for example, that said, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Jesus had him there at the top of the mountain at the Transfiguration. Only a couple of others were there, James and John. And at the Last Supper, Peter said, "I will never desert you or leave you." But then, we hear about how Peter, along with the rest of the 12, lost his nerve when Jesus was arrested and lied about even knowing him 3 times in one night. So when we join the disciples on the beach after the resurrection this morning, it's a little bit awkward. Why? Because this is the first indication of a private conversation between Jesus and Peter after Peter had blown it. But you know what? I don't know if you noticed this, but when Jesus addresses Peter, he doesn't dress him down for being a coward. He doesn't raise the issue at all. Instead, he asked him a simple but profoundly difficult question. He said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me? Do you love me?" You know, Peter's response was, Yes, you know that I love you. Jesus responded with a command, feed my lambs. Then it happened again. Jesus asked the same question. He got the same answer and he gave the same command. But then he went at it a third time. By the way, that's the same number of times that Peter had denied him. And we're told, John tells us that Peter's feelings were hurt. His feelings were hurt that Jesus would ask him the same question 3 times. And so he said, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, one more time, feed my sheep. Now, what are we seeing in this story? What are we seeing in this encounter? Some people have focused on the fact that Peter denied him 3 times, and Jesus asked him if he loved him 3 times. And that is no doubt true. But I don't think that's where the good news is here. Because Jesus didn't just reinstate Peter. He took this imperfect, inconsistent, disloyal, impetuous person, and he entrusted him with a gospel that would change the world. How do we know that? Well, we know from Scripture. Read the book of Acts, for example. Peter was the pillar of the church in Jerusalem after Jesus ascended into heaven. He was at the center of decision making. And then tradition tells us that Peter, along with Paul, became one of the key ways that the gospel was spread throughout the Roman world. And tradition also tells us that under Nero, Peter was crucified upside down because he didn't believe he was worthy to be crucified right side up like his Lord was. Now, how does that kind of thing happen? Except for the Holy Spirit and God's grace. In other words, this encounter tells us that Jesus is more faithful to us than we are to him, always. But he uses us, broken, sinful people, to accomplish incredible things for God, things that we would never be able to do on our own. You know, in this challenging time for the church, in this time of what some are calling contraction, where the church is getting smaller, when there's fear among many people about the future of the church, in a time of skepticism among non-Christians about us and our God, in this time of soul-searching about what it means to be the church, I think this encounter on the beach puts us exactly where we need to be, a place of grace and a place of mission. Because like Peter, you and I are sent. We are sent to share the good news. In other words, I think we're being called back to the basics about what it means to be a Christian. We're not being called, by the way, to tell others why they're wrong. We're not being called to judge people. Instead, we're being called to share the hope that we have in the risen Jesus. The hope that we have in a God who has defeated sin and death forever. Now, what's that God like? Well, the Scriptures tell us. God knows our names, all of us. Knows every hair on our head. Knows our weaknesses. Knows our strengths. And accepts us for who we are for Jesus' sake. But then God does things with us and through us, by the way, often in spite of us, for the kingdom. Despite our inconsistencies, despite our failures, despite our doubt. In other words, God creates in us the ability to live a life of hope and not fear, a life of serving others and not selfishness, a life that is the opposite of what we're accused of being, I think, which is judgmental hypocrites. Instead, we worship a God of grace and humility and new life. That is the Spirit's fruit in us. We're called to be bold witnesses to a God who is a breath of fresh air in a world that is suffocating. Just watch the news. Now, I realize that when we hear the word missionaries, we might get a little bit freaked out. Creates images. You know, maybe the image of going door to door, having the door slammed in your face, or maybe of passing out pamphlets. What do people do with those, by the way? Throw them out. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something far more fundamental about each of us, and that is being able and willing to share our own story, our own hope. There are some practical ways to do this. I'm just going to share a couple of them. How many of you have ever been in a conversation where someone is telling you about a difficult time they're having in their life? Everybody, right? You know what you can do? You can look at that person and say, how can I pray for you? What does that do? Well, first of all, it tells them that you care. It tells them that you worship a God who cares and that you worship a God who hears prayer. And then if you want to be really bold, pray for them right then and there. And that was a blank stare from the entire congregation when I said that. My wife and I, her name is Kathy, and I describe her as delightfully bold. We were sitting with our young kids at that time in the Bob Evans on Olentangy River Road after church. And I was dressed similarly to as I am right now. And 3 tables away, there were 4 women, and the entire time they were doing this, clearly wondering what that priest was doing with that woman. That went on for quite a while. And so Kathy grabbed me by my shirt right here and planted the biggest kiss on my lips you ever saw. But that caused something to happen. Because one of the women got up and she walked over and she said, "Father, where is your parish?" And I said, "I'm a Lutheran pastor." And she went, "Oh, thank God." But then this happened. Turns out, first of all, it was a table of nuns. 4 of them from Ohio Dominican. So I was talking to Sister so-and-so. But the sister looked at me and she said, "Pastor, I don't care if you're Lutheran. I don't care if you're Catholic. I've just been diagnosed with cancer. Would you pray for me?" Well, I'm sitting there with my family, and I could have said, "Of course I'll pray for you," and then kept eating my biscuits and gravy. But something in me said, no, I need to do it right now. So I said, "Get your friends." And so 4 nuns and I walked out into the parking lot, and we held hands in a circle, and we prayed. If I had not done that, I think I would have been disobeying my God. But then when we were done, she said, "You Lutherans can pray." And I said, "There's a lot about us you don't know." It doesn't take much. It doesn't take much to pray for someone. We're uncomfortable thinking about it, but you know what? In the moment, the Spirit will give you the words. The Spirit will give you the words. And that is the greatest witness to your own faith, is speaking to your God on behalf of someone else. Now, there's a second thing that we can do. In the Lutheran branch of Christianity, we have good numbers on this as well. Apparently, Lutherans do this about every 23 years, and that is invite someone to church. Isn't that pathetic? It's pathetic. Now, I'm not saying that you should just walk up to somebody at Easton and say, "Would you go to church with me?" I mean, that would not go well. But you know what? You know what you can do? You can tell them why you go to church in a natural conversation with them. Have you ever thought about why you come? Actually thought about it. You realize that this is not a cult. You don't have to be here. You could be sleeping in. I would be if I didn't believe in Jesus. But you're here. Why are you here? If you can tell someone why you get up and go to church on Sunday morning, you have begun the conversation about the hope that you have in Christ. And then you can invite them to come with you. I was over in one of the great parts of my job is that I'm literally in a different church every Sunday. We have 190 of them. We got plenty to go around in the Southern Ohio Synod. I was over in Western Ohio, and there was a 95-year-old saint of the church talking to me about the fact that they were in this cathedral-sized building with 20 people in it. And it was breaking his heart. He said, "So, I decided that I was going to go door to door. I said, how'd it go? Nobody came. So he started passing out, the service time, the little card with the service time and an invitation. What did people do with those? So then he said this. He said, so I decided I was going to tell people, someone in a conversation while I was talking to them, why I go to church. So he told this young man who had clearly just come out of the drug culture, he said to him, I go to church because when I'm there, I feel loved. I feel thankful that God loves me. I feel like I'm part of a community, that I'm connected to something bigger than me. And if I don't go, I miss it. And that kid came to church. He came. I don't know if he's still there, but he came. But guess what? We know that if you don't invite them, they're not going to come. They're not going to come. You can change someone's life by inviting them to church. And here's a little bit of testimony on my part. Someone inviting me to church changed my life. I was raised in the United Methodist Church. I was a church-going family. But I'd stopped going. A lot of people stopped going in their 20s. And in my prior life, I was an attorney. At that time, I was a prosecutor. And a woman in my office, she said, Bob, where are you going to church? And I thought, oh, great, she's a member of a cult. Well, unless you count Lutherans. So I started going to a Lutheran church. And look what happened. You do not know what God will do through you if you invite someone to church. You just don't know. If they don't show up, fine. But I'm going to say it right now. If you invite someone to church, please be here when they come. And please don't chase them across the gathering area like they're fresh meat. Just be welcoming. Just be welcoming. Tell them where the bathrooms are. Tell them where the coffee is. You never know. You never know how God is going to use you in prayer, or through telling your own story, or through inviting someone. We're installing Pastor Mike today. Pastor Mike is being called to tend this flock and to feed these lambs, not just for you, but for the sake of the world, for the sake of this community. Pastor Mike, as you teach and tend here, know this, that even on your worst day, Jesus is using you, and he is faithful to you no matter what. And people of St. Luke, as you celebrate him coming, know something. Know something, that Jesus is more faithful to his church than we are ever to him. And he is the same person that sat on that beach that morning and looked Peter in the eyes, a man who had failed him, and promised to make him a messenger of God's love. Our Lord is always at work in each of us, and he will bless others through us, often when we don't expect it. That, my sisters and brothers, that is the joy of an installation, because it is a discussion of Christ's faithfulness and Christ's mission for us in a world that desperately needs to know his love. Amen.